Really excited to bring up the CEO of Notified, Erik Carlson. We at Stacker actually just announced a partnership with Notified today. Really excited. Since the first time I met Erik, I think what really struck me is just both how Notified has really been ahead of the curve thinking about GEO and AI search. And Erik is someone who spends his free time playing around with LLMs, hacking things, like really seeing how things work. So I was really excited to have him present some of the stuff that they're seeing at Notified, and really just kind of from the front lines because they're doing a lot of research. And so very excited to bring up CEO of Notified, Erik Carlson.
Thank you. Not sure what everyone thinks about my personal life now, but yeah, I am spending a lot of time talking about LLMs. So Erik Carlson, President and CEO of Notified. We like to say that we help the corporate storyteller, and as I look around the room, that title really describes so much of what everybody does. This has been such an interesting 24 months, really even 18 months for this industry. I've been in this industry for 7 years. I'm actually married to someone in PR. And so whether I wanted to be in this industry or not, I was going to be forced into this industry. As all of you know, being a corporate storyteller is hard, and it's only getting harder. But of course you know that because there have been shifts really over the last decade that have continued, whether that's 2010 and the rise of social media and everyone feeling like we had to change our comm strategy or flip it on its head, to internet proliferation on mobile phones and this concept of an always-on news cycle, to this whole fake news movement that really has undermined trust over the last 5 to 6 years. I think Edelman Trust Index, if anyone follows it, actually showed that we crossed the chasm in 2021 in terms of less people trusting what they read than actually trusting it in the media. More recently, in 2023, generative AI really came to the forefront. AI slop is now a term that we use and we see everywhere. And then most recently, which we're spending a lot of time talking about today, is this concept or this shift from traditional search into GEO or AEO, whatever you want to call it. And as we talk to clients, as I talk to practitioners in the space, I really sum this up into 3 things and 3 challenges. And it's trust, it's noise, and it's visibility. And all of these are actually foundational when you think about crafting an approach to actually cutting through the noise, building trust or authority, which you heard about on the last panel, and increasing brand visibility in the new normal, or what is soon becoming the new normal, which is GEO and search. We talked a little bit about this in the last panel, but what's interesting is AI is actually rewriting your story before customers ever read it. It's so important to write for, everyone says write for the LLM. What you're really doing is you're maximizing the interpretation of this middleman that now exists between what you want to communicate and what's leaving your mouth or your desk in written form, and what's ultimately being interpreted by your customer, your buyer, or the end audience that you ultimately want to reach. That's a different dynamic, and it's changing the way that we all work. And it's why, you heard in the last session, SEO experts have become precious about continuing to manage this influence that ultimately all of us in this room have on brand visibility and narrative story. There's a reason that this all feels so new, right? If you go back 18, 24 months, only 1% of total search was actually happening through AI search engines or LLMs, right? That's not that long ago, 2024. If you go to last year where this really picked up steam, that's actually only moved to 6%, and most of that momentum was in the last quarter of the year. If you fast forward to this year, you can see the explosive growth and the fact that we expect that 6% by some conservative estimates to go to 28%. And what I haven't shown you is the projection for 2030, which is that 80% of all searches will happen natively in LLMs. Yeah. That means that the fact that you're here today thinking about how you need to change your strategy is absolutely the first step. And you're not too late, right? But there is an opportunity to be an early adopter and help control your narrative and actually advance your narrative while you have an advantage. We like to say that AI visibility is earned and not bought. And I think we talked about that in the last session, right? Paid media index is extremely low in terms of prioritization among certain sources. There's a number of different, surveys out there and research out there that's shown 94% of all citations come from non-paid media. And we talked about, someone said fact or fiction, Wikipedia versus owned content. The reality is there is a hierarchy as you think about where you want content placed. And at the very tippy top, it's encyclopedic. And sure, that's Wikipedia. That's hard to influence, though. From there, it's earned media, right? Which is one of the reasons that we partnered with Noah's brand to increase the likelihood of landing earned media at highly authoritative sites. And then it's owned. And what's really interesting is everybody in this room has played at the nexus for decades of earned and owned. And that's why, and we talked about it in the last session, that's why if anybody should champion this, it should come from corporate comms and PR. I woke up, probably 8 months ago in a cold sweat and said the scoreboard is changing. Right? If you think about traditional newswire providers, of which GlobeNewswire certainly is, we've always, validated the ROI of our service based on placements and unique views. That doesn't work anymore when traffic and click-through rates to traditional web properties are declining. And so we had to reinvent the scoreboard. One way that we did that is through a partnership with Profound, and that's been incredibly insightful. So in the first 30 days, we actually affixed citation data to all of the press releases that we released. This was back in August or September of last year. And over those 30 days, we collected more than 2 million citations. Fast forward almost 6 months later, that number is a staggering 150 million citations. And what was really fascinating is the consistent differentiators for the types of content that was consistently outperforming in terms of citation visibility all came down to things that you can control, right? And so we like to say maximizing visibility is about taking control of the things that you can control. You can't control whether something is a trending topic and people are going to search it more. You can't control whether you are a B2C brand that indexes more favorably because everybody knows you, but you can control how you're structuring your narrative and how you're writing content for machines. We spent, a good amount of time actually doing research directly into the citation metrics. For those who are, data geeks and want to find me afterwards, I can tell you all about the regression analysis that I did personally and the work that we did. But we identified essentially 4 pillars that are a new framework that we've published and have made free essentially to the industry because we believe education around what matters and controlling what you can control is really important for the profession and the industry. We call it SOAR. And so the 4 framework components are structure, originality, authority, and recency. And so structure is actually pretty simple. A lot of what we've already been doing around press releases for years, making it a factual document with an FAQ and very clear headlines, very clear subtitles, is part and parcel to what so many of you have done as practitioners in the space. There are additional things that then can be gleaned or done to even amplify that more. And so without going into the detail, I'll tell you guys after there's a QR code, you can download this and read all about it. But there are things like, metadata and structuring your JSON LD tags and thinking about an FAQ section and, shortening actually the length of a quote that you have for an executive so it's more easily parsable. Originality. AI loves original data. And so as an organization, thinking about the insights that you have and the way that you are conducting business, and, it could be something completely different than a commercial desire to sell a product, but it could be a unique data set that you have, and thinking about how you structure that to increase brand visibility because you alone have or are the proprietary and the trusted source for this unique data or metric. That scores very, very well in AI. We talked about authority, right? So that's not only establishing that you have the right to speak on behalf of that organization, but it's also showing up in authoritative domains. Places where trust is signaled as a place where an AI bot can actually crawl and get information to a high fidelity or a high degree. And then recency is really important as well. And so different than traditional PR campaigns, what we found is that the life cycle of brand visibility for a piece of content in an LLM typically peaks around day 15 or 20 and lasts about 45 days. And so all of this, again, is in the case study that we did. But as you're thinking about the routine nature of content that you're developing, how often you have to seed that content to LLMs. Doing it once and then expecting that that's going to continue in terms of visibility doesn't yield the same result. At the same time, the corollary to that is where in the past you might have sent out a press release and looked at the first 24 hours or 48 hours. You're going to be missing a lot of the inherent data and the visibility that that's driving in LLMs. Look, at the end of the day, LLMs are consensus engines. I could sit here and say, you should send more press releases because it's good for me as a business. The reality is you should send more content, period. And that content needs to be consistent across all of the channels that you manage, whether that's earned or whether that's owned. And doing that helps build consensus, which reinforces this entire cycle with LLMs that you are an authoritative source, it's consistent, and that's the answer that ultimately should be surfaced to the top. We thought it was just the beginning to essentially introduce the framework. And so what I pushed my team to do really hard over the last 3 months and why we've waited to kind of talk about this is actually embed this in our product. And so for any users of GlobeNewswire, and I'll do really, really quick demo, we've actually made this product live as of last Thursday. We're now in the beta group. And so if anybody is interested in having a free demo or running a press release through it, come find me, scan a QR code, we're happy to do it. But what essentially we've built is a framework that takes all of these insights around the SOAR model and trains certain agents to look at different components of how you optimize for structure, originality, authority, and recency. And so what you see up on the screen is just a standard queue for a press release that's going to go out. If there's any GlobeNewswire users, you'll recognize this. We allow you to create what's called a press release optimizer submission. What's nice is you just upload a Word document, so typical to your workflow. AI sits and analyzes that Word document over about 20 to 30 seconds. We run it against all of the agents, and you can see the visual off to the left. And what's really nice is it's gone through the press release, and it's found, based on the 6 or 7 agents that we've trained, actual suggestions based on the SOAR Content Framework to improve fluency, authoritative nature, adding unique words. And you can see there's 8 different suggestions across the press release, multiple modals that you can click into, and the ability to actually select one or multiple of the suggested changes. It's not just enough to suggest it, because you may want to actually tweak it. And so we allow you to go through and actually rewrite it, click in, tweak it if the LLM didn't get it completely right, and then reflect it back in the press release. And so you can see, as I've stepped through, multiple types of changes that will be reflected. After you've completed it, we allow you to download track changes and ultimately republish it in Word. And what I think is really incredible is we've added the logic behind the change, because ultimately it typically has to go back through a workflow. You have to get approval from your manager. You have to be able to explain why you've made the change to a core narrative document that one of your managers or executives or your client has already signed off on. And so we give you that information in a way that's easily digestible. And so again, I think this is just the beginning. One of the reasons that we did this is because we found data that if you use this framework, your citations increase on average by 2.6x. And so that's an incredibly powerful metric, going back to where I started, because there's so much that you can't control. We talked about where LLMs index on information, but what you can control is the structure of what you write, the originality of the piece that you're working on, the authority of where you're publishing that piece across different channels, and then the recency of how often you're actually communicating that same message. So with that, I want to thank you guys for the attention, and definitely QR codes if you want to follow up. Thank you.